The US Congress has passed a last-minute funding measure and narrowly avoided a government shutdown. But that funding only goes as far as December the 3rd, and both Republican and Democratic lawmakers will be wrangling over longer-term spending measures until then. As Yasmin Al-Sabawi reports, Washington has another big problem on its hands. The government is also in danger of defaulting on its debts.
Crisis averted, for now. Just hours before federal agencies would have had to start shutting down, the U.S. Congress voted to keep funding them. The bill only provides a budget for the next 2 months, but it includes more than $6 billion to cover the costs of the Afghanistan evacuation and refugee resettlement in the U.S. There's also more than $28 billion for disaster relief after a spate of wildfires and hurricanes across the country. By December, Americans will again be facing the prospect of a government shutdown.
But between now and then, lawmakers must come to an agreement on what to do about the U.S. debt ceiling. The Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is warning that if Republicans refuse to raise the debt limit by October 18th, the country would default on its loans for the first time in history. And that would plunge the U.S. into a recession.
The Democrat-controlled House of Representatives has already passed a bill to increase the debt limit through next year, but it is facing staunch opposition from the Republicans that make up half the Senate. They see the increase as a way of making room for President Joe Biden's proposal of a $3.5 trillion social services bill.
You want to raise taxes by trillions and trillions of dollars, then you're going to have to adjust the borrowing limit to accommodate all that new spending. Republicans are not going to contribute to the biggest build-up and run-up of government that we've seen, certainly in our lifetimes.
A firm rebuttal.
Democrats say that's not the case.
Only 3% of the current debt that we're lifting the debt ceiling to accommodate has been accrued under President Biden. A big chunk of this, though, is attributed to at least $2 trillion in the tax scam of 2017, where the Republicans gave 83% of the benefits to the top 1%.
The White House has had to repeatedly clear Biden's schedule this week so he can negotiate with lawmakers. And the political squabbling will likely take all season. Yasmin Al-Sabawi, TRT World, Washington.
Victoria Scholar is the head of investment at Interactive Investor in London. She tells us what's at stake in these multi-track negotiations in the US House and Senate.
In terms of what a shutdown would actually mean, a full shutdown could affect 850,000 workers. It means that non-essential functions within the government are put on hold, and there could be major implications for the economy, like delays to businesses in terms of their loans and mortgage payments, also food stamps, and possibly less security and staff at places like airports. Now, remember that under the Trump administration, we saw the longest shutdown in history, with a stalemate between the Republicans and the Democrats that put 800,000 workers without pay. Now, unfortunately, the shutdown debate has become rather political, and that's why we're seeing debates between the Democrats and the Republicans, and it's almost become a political bargaining chip. But in terms of the markets, we're coming off the worst quarter since the start of the pandemic, when we had that major market sell-off in March of 2020, and in fact the worst month as well. So a lot of jitters, and it feels as though this isn't helping. In terms of the debt ceiling, the US government has a debt limit of $28.4 trillion, which is the total amount that it owes its creditors. Now, Congress would need to raise that ceiling in order to prevent a default. That way, the Treasury can then meet its financial obligations and use taxes and cash reserves. Otherwise, it will default. Now, if there's a failure to raise that government debt ceiling, then the government may not be able to pay its bills. Now, as I said, the market's already jittery. No doubt, if we were to see that, we could potentially see a sell-off in the markets and, of course, wider implications for the economy as well.